So I just picked up a small hobby bandsaw, and for my first project I thought it would be really cool to make a new handle for this jack plane. Now this is a number 5 jack plane. It was quite cheap, which is why it doesn't have the greatest handle, and this is actually my second handle. It has broken once on me already. So I think one of the reasons for that is that the grain, even though you can't see it, is oriented horizontal, so there's a lot of weak points. So I always wanted to make my own handle for that, and now with the bandsaw that suddenly becomes a lot easier. So I'm going to take this off and make a new one. So that I got the handle off, and this is a piece of mahogany I had left over from the bench actually. Okay, now I'm just going to trace it out. Pretty good. So I'm finding my way with the bandsaw and figuring out what kind of curves I can make and when I need to trace back. I think a bandsaw is really a great beginner tool because it's not nearly as intimidating as a table saw or a miter saw. Besides, there are so many cool projects you can do with it. I realized when cutting the thickness down that it was a bit too big to go through, so I had to trim it a little. Then I had no problem. I took my time with this cut, and I used a table saw jig as a fence that I clamped down to guide the wood through to get a straight cut. I brought out a chisel to round the corners and shape it some. This wood was a real pleasure to work with. Working with sharp chisels is quite fun. I was trying to be mindful of the wood grain and switch the direction I was working in whenever I hit a curve where the grain changed. To make it even rounder and smoother, I used a belt sander that I secured to a vise. This works quite well. And I finished hard to reach areas with a rasp. Okay, I think it's pretty good. I'm just trying to line up the holes here from the old handle, because if they're not lined up properly, it won't fit. It's a little bit too far to the one side. Yeah, good. It worked. Cool. The handle is all smooth and sanded, and I'm just gonna oil it with some linseed oil. I'm glad I had this mahogany here to work with because you really want to use hardwood, so you want a strong handle, and so it's perfect to use a little scrap left over. I think this looks a lot nicer than this. So this is my first project ever with a bandsaw really, and I'm quite happy with the way it turned out. It was really fun. I have all these ideas in my head about other things to make on a bandsaw. I just love how you have such freedom to do all kinds of curves and shapes that you are incapable of doing, you know, with a coping saw. So when doing this, just make sure you have a sharp chisel. Makes a big difference. And be careful with your fingers. So after just waiting a couple minutes, I'm wiping off the excess oil, and now I'm gonna assemble it. Better put it the right way. This makes me really want to get a lathe, because I would love to make part for the front too. Here we have it! A new handle on an old plane, turning this pretty cheap planer into a much more comfortable and nicer planer to use. Very happy with this. Perfect.